Okay, so I have a small confession to make. I love watching YouTube videos where people explain what kind of apps and tools they have on their laptops and their phones. And that's the first reason why I'm making this video. But the second reason why I'm making this video is that I just upgraded to a new laptop and I configured it as a new. So I'm starting with a clean slate, and it was a really good opportunity for me to see what apps am I actually using on my Mac. So currently I'm using 16-inch MacBook Pro from 2019, and that's the baseline model with half a terabyte of storage, 16 gigabytes of RAM, 6-core i7 and Radeon Pro 5300M. And before this machine I was actually using a MacBook Air from 2018, so the first model with Retina display, and it was also a baseline one with only 128 gigabytes of storage. And if I look at this now, it was way too little storage for my needs, especially editing videos and photos. So half a terabyte doesn't sound perfect either for most of the people, but for me, with my very minimalistic approach and getting rid of files after I'm done working with them, it's pretty good. And I also have external drive to deal with footage like one for this video. And overall, I'm really happy with the upgrade to 16-inch MacBook Pro, but I'm not going to cover it too much in this video since there's already a lot of great reviews out there. Instead, I would like to focus on tools that I'm using to get my work done. So as I mentioned, I'm creating these videos, but besides that, I also edit podcasts, I also write articles, and I also do a lot of design work. So if you're doing any of that, you might be curious what tools I'm using. Okay, but going to what's actually on my laptop, as you may see, my desktop is very clean, and the only thing I have here is one folder for work. And my overall philosophy using desktop is that I only keep their files that I'm working on at this moment. So for example, if I'm working on a new podcast episode, all the files on the episode that I'm currently working on will end up on a desktop. And once I'm done working on this episode, the file is gonna go somewhere else. Going to the dock, I actually keep it at the bottom of the screen, even though I know that there's a lot of people saying that it's much better having it on the left side or on the right side, but I just got used to it this way. And yes, I also have auto hiding off since I'm using full screen apps most of the time. And apps that I keep in dock are only those that I run all the time, which are productivity apps as well as communication apps. All of the other apps I always launch using Spotlight. So the first app I have in my dock is Safari, which is my browser of choice, and I use it for many reasons, but most importantly, it's just very fast, works really well with all of the continuity features, and supports all the extensions that I'm using. Next one is Mail from Apple, and actually before that I was using Spark, but I was due only to one annoying bug with Gmail that I finally solved. Next one is Apple's own calendar app, and I used to use Fantastical, but after introduction of the subscription model, it got too expensive for me to justify paying for it. Next app in my dock is Things, that I already covered in a separate video on this channel. And next two apps are just Messages and Telegram. And moving on to the menu bar, the first app is just QuickTime because I'm recording screen right now. The next app I have here is iTranslate that I use for translating some German stuff to English. After that I have Creative Cloud that I still pay for Lightroom. I'm actually looking into different workflows that would allow me to edit my photos on both Mac and an iPad. But for now, Lightroom is a really good solution and I really enjoy using it. And the last app in the menu bar that's not one of the default Apple ones is Shifty, which is an app that allows me to whitelist certain apps from night shift. And it's really handy when I'm using Final Cut or Lightroom and I don't want to have night shift on. The rest of the apps I just keep in the Launchpad, although as I already said, I only access them using Spotlight. The first page here are mostly apps from Apple, and a few notable things here are Apple's own Notes app that I actually really enjoy using, and the only thing I miss in it is support for Markdown. But for writing in Markdown, I actually use AI Writer, which I find to be one of the best Markdown apps ever. It's actually the first app for macOS I bought ever, and I really enjoy using it. Going back to the first page, I have a whole suite of Apple's Pro apps. So the first one is Final Cut that I use to edit these videos. Then I have Compressor for compressing these videos. And then I have Motion for creating lower thirds and titles, but I'm still learning how to use the tool. The next app here is Logic Pro X that's intended to be used as a digital audio workstation for musicians, but I actually use it for podcast editing. And for most of the people, it's a total overkill and GarageBand is more than enough, but I really like using it for features like remove silence. But that's something I want to cover in a separate video since I find Logic Pro X to be a really nice step up for a lot of podcast editors out there. And the last thing I have on this screen are Adobe apps, so again Lightroom and Photoshop, But the last one I actually don't use that often since I have a few other graphic design apps installed. So for creating something like YouTube thumbnail, I wouldn't use Photoshop, I would open probably Pixelmator Pro, which for most of the people should be much better alternative than Photoshop. From other design tools, I also have Figma and Sketch, and both of them are digital design apps. So they're intended to use for UI and UX designers, and actually that's something I use them for quite a lot. But what I also really like about these apps is that you can create symbols, so it's really easy to create similar looking artboards. And what that means is that if you want to create social media visuals for a few different platforms, it's really easy to create them in a lot of different variants. And that's what I use it for the most. As you may see on the second screen, I have a lot of smaller utilities like carabiner elements, air body, or noise body. And I actually covered all of that in a Medium post that you can find linked in the description below. But one more app here that I heavily rely on and I cannot imagine not using is 1Password. So not only does it allow you to store your passwords, but you can also use it to store all the one-time codes so that you don't have to rely on SMS messages. And yeah, the rest of the thing that you can see here is very basic. I have Sonos for controlling my speakers, I have Todoist for shared lists, I have Audacity, which is a free audio software that you can use for editing podcasts. I have MindNote, which is a really cool app for creating mind maps, and I also have things like WhatsApp, Skype, and Twitter. Overall, I try to keep my Mac as minimal as possible, and I mostly rely on the apps provided by Apple. And that's one of the reasons why 0.5 TB of storage is way more than enough for me. And yeah, that's all I have on my Mac. If you have any questions about the apps and tools I just showed you, you can always ask them in the comments down below. Also, if you're Polish and you're looking for a new podcast about technology, I just started a new one that I'm going to link in the description below. So yeah, that's all for the episode. Thank you for watching and see you in the next one.